this week, guys?
I haven't heard otherwise.
Oh, yeah, that's a good way to put it. All right, well, then we're probably waiting for Sean.
The Hyperledger Technical Steering Committee meeting ended a little early, so I'm surprised we don't see everyone already here.
Yeah, it's Thursday morning, you know. I always find it one of the most difficult mornings of the week to wake up, but it's filling up rapidly.
Hello, everybody.
Good morning, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing well. Sean has an appointment. I apologize for being a minute and a half late. So he told me I get to take credit for all of his preparation. So I appreciate that.
All right. Okay. Now we know what's going on.
It looks like the recording started.
Yes, I'm managing the recording today.
Beauty. So we're in good shape. So let's dive in. Sean might join. We'll see how that goes. Sharing my screen. So this is our second meeting in the new wiki. Probably want to refine the agenda over time. I was just realizing it doesn't have introductions on there. So as is our usual habit, we will take some time near the beginning of the call to do some introductions. But let's start by just reminding everybody the Hyperledger Code of Conduct, or as a classic movie says, be excellent to each other. And see who's old enough to have watched that movie. The reminder about the Hyperledger antitrust policy. We will forego the dramatic reading because, I don't know, do any of you have the ability to do it in like a famous actor's accent? That'd be cool. So, no volunteers.
I have yet to meet someone who can't do an Arnold impression, so it's always the default fallback.
Hey, we have to make sure we're sensitive there.
So that's why I said famous actor, because if we said like ethnic accents, I would hash this so bad people would think I was being offensive on purpose. It's just because I'm not good at acting. Anyway, so do remember the antitrust policy. Don't do anything that breaks legal laws in your jurisdiction or in my jurisdiction. I'm not worried about anybody else's. But in general, you know, this is an open forum for industry collaboration, and but we still need to follow antitrust policy. Housekeeping. There are some announcements. The Sao Paulo, Brazil Bootcamp is coming up in June. I would love to go. Unfortunately, I can't. Hopefully other people get to join. Anybody who'd like to attend, please contact Karen Ottoni or the community architects. There's a channel on Hyperledger Rocket Chat, pound community-architects. You can reach out to everybody there. So they're looking for volunteers, somebody that can do training. So definitely reach out if you're willing to do that. There's also a request for comments on how to support community efforts in 2020 from Hyperledger. The governing board would like to review their suggestions by the end of July, so that gives you a little bit of time. There's a link here to the 2020 RSC, so please add your thoughts on that. Hyperledger has done a good job at providing the infrastructure that our open source projects are built on, and they're sincere about wanting to do better. So please share your ideas with them. Any thoughts on any other announcements before we go through the call history? Okay, so we have some upcoming calls. We don't have an agenda for the next couple calls here. There are some people who have been nudged, Stephen Gubler, Michael Lauder, on various topics, other people we can nudge to present. If you have a use case revolving Indy, we would love to see it. We can provide feedback and learn from your use case. So definitely reach out to Sean. I'm going to add an additional. So in the future, we want to get GitLab, CI/CD. Just so everybody knows, anybody can edit this wiki. So feel free to come in and add additional things. But the other one we want is on and creds 2.0. I'd like to discuss that at some point in the future. So those aren't scheduled yet, but we're elbowing people who are willing to share. And anybody else that is interested in presenting, please add yourself to the wiki and we'll reach out to you or reach out to Sean directly. I should say, where do we, oh, we do have intros on here. Okay, so we'll keep going through the plan. Project updates. Who'd like to report on the Aries working group call yesterday afternoon?
I can. We talked about mobile links, protocols, service decorators, the Connect protocol, which pretty darn sure is going to be renamed the Did Exchange protocol via someone's excellent suggestion. Renaming wallets and locks, a new method of securing wallets by Mike Lauder. If you're interested in any of those things, please review. The recording is posted.
Thank you for the very brief summary. It cracked me up a bit attending the call that, when you have a new organization, a new community, a lot of time spent on nomenclature. But we're making good progress on standardizing terms. We realized that we were talking past each other a few times. Like, no, let's define that term. So I think we're coming to a good place to build fairly quickly.
Yes, I should also mention that next week we have on deck a discussion about Asia Pacific friendly call times, a demo of how UPort messaging currently works, and I believe we have an overlays demo as well. I got to figure out the details of that one.
That'll be great. And speaking about the overlays demo, anybody willing to report on the Indy semantics group? So none of the semantics attendees are here today. Just so people realize, if you're watching the call recording or if you haven't seen on this call, there is a list of all the previous call notes here in the wiki. I don't think semantics has moved here, but this has there's a template, and each time we put a summary in, it shows up on this page. So you can get an overview of the various different calls. With that brief digression, did somebody from the semantics call come off mute? Okay, moving on. Indy SDK working group. We had that this week, but instead of me reporting on what we did, who else would? We got Sean was there, Kyle was there, a few of you guys. Anybody volunteering to present, to summarize? I'll take over then. We did release planning mostly, which is actually, I think it's the most productive type of meeting. We went through the previous release, what got released last month, and then we went through the next couple releases and talked about who is building what, and had some good discussion about the right way to build it, the timing, the right way to manage the release testing, quality, and things like that. So that was really good. We also went through in some detail a problem that was found by Steve McCowan about the iOS and Rust. That problem is interesting and painful. It sounds like there's not going to be a solution in the short term there. And talked about how we work better with the Aries community and starting to put together a plan for how Indy and Aries will relate in the future. Anything I missed there? Hey, moving on. Ursa and Sovereign Crypto.
We're just getting ready to submit some RFCs and PRs for all of the non-creds 2.0 and documentation for that. So that's the progress there.
Excellent. One of the Alex and Sergey were looking at some, and they said, "Hey, there's a bunch of non-creds 2.0 work done in Ursa. Is it POC or is it moving towards production already?"
I don't know what they're talking about. We haven't pushed any code for non-creds 2.0 in there.
Okay.
Mike,
that's
can you say something about the switch from thinking about snarks to thinking about bulletproofs, just so that this group's aware kind of the general direction?
Yeah, sure. So Dimitri has, along with his a group of his have created a or a circuit-friendly hash function, which essentially makes it so that any bulletproof is just as fast as any snarks that we would be doing, which means we won't be doing ZK snarks at all for non-creds 2.0. We'll just be doing bulletproofs, which means there will be no trusted setup required for creating these circuits, which is a good thing. So that means that should simplify our implementation as well.
My sole criteria for judging the quality of an encryption protocol is by the quality of the acronym. And ZK snarks versus bulletproofs, that's tough. They're both pretty good acronyms.
Bulletproofs is better.
You like that better than snarks?
How about this, Richard? Bulletproofs paired with the Poseidon hash.
Yeah, there's a ring to that.
That should be said in the Schwarzenegger accent, I think.
The Poseidon hash.
You say Poseidon hash, and now I'm imagining a stoned Poseidon, so I'm not sure that's the intended image.
So thank you for the update, Mike. And people who are interested should attend the next. Now, the Ursa calls every other week. So next week is Sovereign Crypto, correct?
Sovereign Crypto is every week. Ursa is this coming Wednesday.
Okay, good to know. And of course, the Hyperledger calendar public meetings is the next is where you can find out all the meetings that are going on. One proposal. So Nathan and I are both going to be out next week. You're on vacation next week, right, Nathan?
Yes, I will be out for this call next week.
And I'll be out as well. I'm not sure. We don't have attendee anybody registered to present. One proposal Sean was suggesting we discuss is, should we move the cadence of this call to be less often? Instead of every week, should be every other week. That might give time for other important calls as we've expanded into a new community. Varies.
Yeah, probably makes sense. I mean, how many, let me put it this way, how many subjects of this call are moving over to be part of Aries calls?
So if that's the case, one thing that I might propose is that if we move this call to every other week, we might want to let every other week be Aries or Indy. That way we always have a call at this time every week, but it's not always the same call. We've had a lot of success with that at Hyperledger, with the architecture working group and the identity working group being opposite weeks, and some of the other groups doing that same thing with opposite weeks, to make it so that those who participate on both have an easier calendar scheduling slot.
So next week we're planning to talk about call times on the Aries call. I would note, however, that this particular time is bad for Asia Pacific. So they tend to like noon or later, but better for European. So
anyways.
Sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
I said I'm just not a fan of this time anyways.
I don't know. You might find you're always up at this time when you live in New Zealand. Kyle's a night owl. So that's the proposal. We don't have to make a decision immediately, but one advantage to it being an Aries call is that the regular Aries call we've been having, the Aries working group on Wednesdays, is favorable to Asia, to the Pacific, Australia, New Zealand specifically. Might be early for Asia though. I don't know, but maybe it gives us the two slots that we can rotate between.
It's early for Asia. This is better for Europe.
Yeah. So, proposal to consider. I should have noted that.
Man, I'm kind of wishing it was a flat Earth right now.
It would make it easier. Yes, that time zones are a drag. Okay, any other comments on calls or meetings, announcements, things along those lines? As per our tradition, we like to do intros near the beginning of the call so that we don't run out of time. So as Sean likes to say, is an identity group. We don't force people to reveal their identities. But if you are new to the group or otherwise haven't introduced yourself, now's a good time for you to explain a little bit about who you are, what brings you here, what you want to get out of the group, suggestions for us to make this group useful for you.
Yeah, hi, this is Tony Rose. New to the call. I joined the call a couple times last year and a couple times the year before that. I'm in a new role at Citibank Ventures in the Emerging Tech Group. And just started there, been there about 2 months. There's a lot of interest in identity, obviously, at a bank. And I've had a lot of interest in Indy and Sovrin for a while. So I'm just looking to stay up to speed with the latest. I'm excited about how Aries has come out, and I'm really excited about the progress we made in the space. So looking to find opportunity to move forward some projects in my new role at Citibank.
That's great. Thank you for introducing yourself. And I especially love that you've been able to attend off and on for, you said 2 years now?
Yeah.
That's since the early days of the project. It's great. You know, that's my goal, is for my career to be able to let me bounce around and still stay part of this. I love open source because you get to stay in part of the community even if you're bouncing around.
Yeah, you know, I heard about this 2 years ago. I went to the Computer Science Museum, the IAW. I was doing an identity project. I was doing some consulting on identity for a company called Juvo, who will eventually use this technology, but it was way too early. And I learned about SSI there and immediately was kind of struck in by it, and have been, you know, kind of hoping it would mature so I could get involved in doing what I do, which is more product building and, you know, go to market phase. So it seems like we're getting closer. I was actually on a call yesterday with Dan Giafoli from IBM talking about a pilot Citibank did with Evernym a few months ago called Jobs Creds. And we were kind of brainstorming on how we can take next steps there. So yeah, thanks for the welcome. Hope to be able to contribute in some way to the community.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And we would love, depending on how your project's progressing and your organization rules, if you were willing to share your use case, we would love to put that on a future meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're kind of looking for those, right? Ones that the business like gives us some traction to move on. We've been publishing, so my group publishes internal like thought leadership pieces on our newsletter and tries to generate inbound demand from the business to help, you know, where we can sort of consult with them in terms of, here's some technology, here's how it can apply to your business. And when we've been writing stuff on identity and SSI in the past few months, is generating a lot of interest. But I haven't seen new use cases yet. I think people are still trying to wrap their head around it and understand how it doesn't disintermediate their business and how it adds value. So there's still a lot of education going on.
Yeah, we're definitely finding that as well at Evernym. So excellent. Thank you for sharing your use case and your progress.
Yep.
Anyone else want to introduce themselves?
Yeah, I'd like to introduce myself. This is Lynn Bendixson. I have been on the call before, but it's been a while. I'm an employee of the Sovrin Foundation, been here about 8 or 9 months. My role here is the network operations, kind of take care of the Sovrin networks and make sure they stay up and get their upgrades at the right times, etc. And then also testing on those networks and among other things, variety of stuff as things usually go. So, and I'll be presenting later, and so I've joined the call today, and I'll be joining occasionally to give updates and stuff on the networks as people are interested. Thanks.
Thank you for introducing yourself, Lynn. I think Lynn, if not already, very soon will hold the title of maintaining the largest, longest running Indy deployment. So that's quite a crown to wear. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, a crown of thorns.
yeah, it can be a painful crown at times. Yes.
Thanks, Bowman.
Anybody else want to introduce themselves? I'm going to nudge our Hyperledger intern that's on the call. Do you have audio, Ibrahim?
Right, I'm just okay. So I'm Ibrahim. I'm currently pursuing cybersecurity postmaster in France. So that's what I got interested in, everything related to blockchains and identities. And I just started my internship on Monday. So I'll be working with Richard and David on the JIT signing with the IDs part. So that's it.
Excellent. And Dave presented last week in this call on the Git signing with DIDs, and Ibrahim's going to work on moving that forward. It's a big task to complete in one summer, but with some luck, he'll make a tangible contribution we can all benefit from. So that'll be nice. So thank you for joining. And so our goal, the reason why I broke protocol and invited Ibrahim, nudged Ibrahim to introduce himself, is if you see him on Rocket Chat, understand he's the Hyperledger intern, and we need to help him so that he's part of our community long term. We'd like to see him contributing long past his internship. So please look for questions from him and reach out and help him if possible.
Hey,
welcome, Ibrahim.
What's your Rocket Chat handle? Ibram?
I'm sorry?
What's your Rocket Chat handle?
It's Ibrahim EL. I'll just post it in the chat now.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hey, I'd also like to say on behalf of lots of us that we're very excited about your work.
Yeah, I'll go this far. Abraham, if you finish the did-get method this and what Dave has in mind this summer, you will go down, in one summer, you will go down in the Developer Hall of Fame.
So no pressure at all.
No pressure. Yeah. No, seriously, we're all. It's an ambitious project, but it's incredibly cool use of DIDs, and will infect a very large population of hard to infect developers. So go for it.
Thank you.
Very exciting. We did get one other Hyperledger intern assigned to our project. So in a future call, we hope to get that person sharing their project and what they're presenting on or what they're working on. Any other introductions before we move on? I think I recognize everybody else on the call. Okay, so let's move on. There's two topics that are related that we want to cover today. You're going to hear a lot from me today. I apologize for that, but hopefully it's useful. We're going to talk about recent improvements in Indy Node, and then we're going to talk about when you can use those improvements when you can start playing with them on the Sovrin network. So Lynn and I will be taking a chunk of the call before we get to open discussion. Before we do that, I just want to cover, let people know, Evernym does a sprint demo every 2 weeks where we show what we've contributed, and I've moved the agendas to that into the wiki so that it's easy for people to search for previous stuff. We get a lot of questions, and my answer is, did you look at the last video, or did you look at the video a month ago? And now it should be easier to find those. You can see I'm in the process of posting the video from today, and these are the topics that we presented on. And there's over a year here. I only have links to the actual videos here. The playlist is at the top, but there's 14 months of content here, and in the YouTube Evernym channel, in the Hyperledger playlist is where these live, Hyperledger and Sovrin, and again about 14 months of content. So that should prove useful. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each the top few releases. Let's see if I can present this in a way that Zoom doesn't get confused. And Zoom looks like it's still confused. You're probably only seeing a third of my screen, it says. Let me try that again. Okay, are you seeing the slide all right?
Yep.
Thank you. So in the first 6 months of 2019, we released a bunch of stuff on Indy Node, and most of these we started a bunch of projects in the end of 2018. So we released Indy the first, we call it minimum viable network to Sovrin in early 2018. Then we spent 6 months really improving it, making a lot of changes, released that in November of 2018. And then we tackled a few large projects that have taken the last 6 months to complete. And those have been released. We want to make sure people are aware of them. So that's multi-signature auth rules, the audit ledger, transaction author agreements, and then we'll go through a list of secondary improvements we made. And for each one of these, the goal is to give you a link to the sprint demo for more information and point you to the documentation. So this is not, I mean, we can go into a detailed discussion if needed, but we have a little bit of time. But the idea is to stay high level and let people that are interested dig deeper. So multi-signature auth rules, one of the concerns that was raised last about a year ago with Indy was that trustees can take over the network. They can create as many new trustees as they'd like. And that obviously is not desirable. And so we added a different way to approach the permission scheme, a table on the config ledger called auth rules that allows you to say, in order to create anchor a new NIM with the role trustee, it takes multi-signature 3 other trustees or whatever we decide, whatever that particular deployment decides. We've discussed this many times in our sprint demos. You can see the process in detail by reviewing those different videos. So these are the sprint numbers, and you can see the Jira each in the Jira, the Indy Jira at jira.hyperledger.org in the Indy node project. There and Indy SDK. These are the sprint names that you can see to track which issues were done when. There's also 2 epics related to this that you can go get more details on exactly what happened and how we did it. And this was rolled to the Sovrin mainnet in May. There were some bugs in querying auth rules that have been fixed. Those are getting rolled out currently, but it's there for you to play with now in the most recent releases. There's some key documentation. The default auth rules. Oh, I don't think Zoom liked me clicking that link. Let me try this again. Okay, the default auth rules are listed in Indy node docs authrules.md. So these are the defaults. Auth rules are stored on the ledger, on the config ledger as a JSON string, and then they get parsed accordingly. So you can see the transaction format in transactions.md for the auth rule and how it's actually stored. There's an example here. You can do ands or ors in the constraints. It's very flexible. We really try to prioritize this for security around multi-signature and flexibility, because we recognize that different Indy deployments have different needs, and we as Indy maintainers don't want to be defining it for everybody. We want the Sovrin network to be able to decide on their policy team, and any other Indy deployment to be able to make their decisions. And but the default deployment is currently is I listed. In the future, we'll probably make the default even more open in order to make the developer experience really easy, but we wanted to have a smooth upgrade path for people as they move towards the auth rules.
Yeah, one thing to point out here is just because it's configurable doesn't mean you need your own network. But one of the reasons why it's important it's configurable is we want to make the development environments can be very open access and very easy to use, especially when you're doing a sandbox just on your own local host, while at the same time making it very simple to enforce security on the public deployments without having a lot of risk.
Exactly. Thank you, Nathan. And then the other key piece of documentation here is the request.md. If you ever have a question about Indy node, in the Indy node repo in the docs folder, looking at the transactions.md and the request.md is the best way to get an answer. Each type of request you can make of node is documented here, and it tells you all the fields and how they work. So highly recommend people spend more time in this document when they're interacting with the ledger. And there's an auth rules as well where you can return more than one rule at a time. Okay, any questions on multi-signature and auth rules?
Have we done a benchmark since this update?
We have done benchmarks to validate that our minimum performance criteria of 10 writes per second with a diverse set of transactions does succeed, but we have not done a benchmark yet for seeing how fast, looking for improvement to see how to max it out. The last time we maxed out the network was last December, and we found that without plugins, we could get, I don't remember the exact number. Alex had another meeting he had to go to, but we could do a lot of reads. Let's just put it that way. If I remember right, it was around 1,000 reads a second, but we were doing like around 15 writes a second. And if you turned on plugins through fees through plugins, then it dropped to right around 10 writes a second, but reads still stayed really high. We think this probably, we don't think this impacted performance negatively. When we did in our testing, it's shown to be about the same.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent question. Now, one reason why we haven't done a significant performance load test in the last little while is because in June we're currently working on refactoring how plugins work on the ledger, and we expect that to boost the performance. We want to finish that work. And in July, we're going to do the PBFT view change protocol, which that's the biggest concern we have with network stability today, is if you do lots of view changes in a row, you can have problems. And so we're fixing the way that view change works. Once that's done, we really want to pound on it and see how it holds up. So probably 2 months before we do a significant load test effort there.
I have a quick comment while we're on auth rules here. I've been testing auth rules. I made a script-like thing that will go out and set all the auth rules for a particular network. And I ran that yesterday on the staging net. And it had an unfortunate side effect of changing the ability for a steward to create a trust anchor. So that's been brought to my attention, and I'll be working on fixing that later in the next few hours or so.
Excellent. And I should say that up to this point, Lynn has done the most playing with auth rules besides the team that implemented it, and he's been able to raise a number of issues that we've been able to incorporate to make it easier to use. We highly encourage other people to play with this. We've worked on it for a long time. We think the logic is sound, but there's a lot of usability issues that Lynn's helped us clean up. So we hope other people can provide feedback on that as well. Okay, I don't know why that went back to big. Okay, so Audit Ledger. When we implemented the idea of plugins on the ledger, we realized that there's some cases where view change gets triggered and the plugin gets, the ledgers that are created through a ledger plugin get caught up, during catch up, ledgers that are integrated through the ledger plugin system can be caught up in varying orders, and that lack of determinism can cause significant problems. So we realized that in order to provide that consistency, we needed to add an additional ledger that contains the Merkle root of each of the ledgers that are active at the time. And that gives us another benefit. With the auth rules capability, we now have on the config ledger the permission scheme. And that makes there's an audit question. How do I know that action X had the right number of signatures at that time? How do I keep the exact time in the config ledger and the domain ledger in sync? And the audit ledger provides that auditability. So it was fairly complicated. We did unfortunately find a bug. This was caused the problem in May that we were able to address. But it does appear to be improving stability and performance as well. There's a design document in the Indy, I think this one's in Plenum, about the audit ledger. So people can refer to that if they want to better understand how that ledger works. Any questions on the audit ledger? Of course, there's the Epic and a couple sprint demos. This was rolled to the Sovrin network in May. Transaction auth agreement. The governance team in on the Sovrin network identified some challenges with stewards and the liability they have. How do they show that people are writing to a global public ledger with understanding that it's a global public ledger, and what behavior is acceptable and what behavior is not acceptable? And so we build a system that allows each network to post their policies, and these policies are required to be agreed by transaction authors at the time they write. That agreement consists of 3 fields being added to the transaction format: the date, time the user agreed, or the author agreed, a hash of the agreement, and a string which indicates the acceptance mechanism that was used, the user experience that was used. And so the Sovrin Foundation is going to come out with some guidelines on what user experience is important. The legal team we consulted with was very clear that user experience matters in informed consent. If the program's just signing it without the user interacting, then it's not informed consent, and the network holds all that liability. But if we can show that the user interacted with the system to know what they were doing, then the user is responsible. And the nice thing about forcing that user interaction to be specified as a string is that it means that if the actual user experience is different from what is being warranted, what's being claimed, then that's fraud on behalf of the programmer, on behalf of the author. So again, the network's not liable for that. And there's some incentives, some legal frameworks that can be used to say, yes, this is the right way that people make this agreement.
Well, and
that's the
point here.
Oh, go ahead, Nathan.
We're trying to make sure there's clear, justifiable basis for the network to retain the data over time. So we want to make sure that the users know why they're putting the data on the network, and the network can say, this data needs to stay here because you made a commitment that these other people can depend on this data going forward.
Exactly. So thank you. There's an epic. It has lots of discussion for why we designed it the way we did, lots of question and answer. There was lots of back and forth on this one. It was fairly messy to get the requirements because there are a lot of stakeholders, different legal teams, different advice. And we might have to evolve this as it moves into practice and we get more feedback. This might have to continue to evolve. There's a design document. It goes into some detail about how the design works. And of course, the request document does discuss how that request happens and the specific fields and all that kind of thing. So those are, so this is the request.md, goes into that detail. And the acceptance mechanism list as well. So I put on here that it'd be enforced on the Sovrin network in June. Lynn told me that there's an update to that, but you can either discuss it now, Lynn, or if you have slides and want to go through a holistic thing, you can go next. How do you prefer to do things?
Well, go over that when I do my slides.
Okay, excellent. So those are the three big changes: is multi-signature auth rules, audit ledger, and the transaction auth agreement. There's a set of secondary changes that are just good to note. They don't warrant quite the level of detail. We recognized a problem last fall where you could talk to a node that was still doing catch-up, and it could return a result that was out of date. And for credentials, that usually isn't an issue because credentials are fairly long-lived, as schema defs and cred defs. But as people start using the plugins to integrate payment systems, having up-to-date responses is really important. The other value of the freshness check is that it allows us to validate consensus. So as we're doing network monitoring, we want to be able to say, is everything actually consensus? And we didn't have a good check for that besides writing to the ledger. So there's a lot of dummy writes to ledger. We're doing key rotations every 5 minutes or so to make sure that things are consensus. But since this went to the Sovrin ledger, so the Sovrin network in May, we can now do the freshness check and just do an actual ledger write, much less often. I think we decide on once a day or something. So that's the freshness check. In addition, we worried a lot about network monitoring. Stewards were using their steward keys to do network monitoring, which seems like not a great practice. So stewards can create a new role called network monitoring, a new NIM with a new role, and that person can execute validator info, can check freshness, can check consensus, things like that, without having to use their trustee keys, or their steward keys, I mean. During December and January, and we've done a few other bugs fixes, we've identified a number of problems with catch-up. That's that we've implemented. Some of these problems have significantly improved performance. We now spread catch-up across multiple nodes. We now do catch-up. We are more careful about when we do catch-up, and that should improve performance quite a bit. So you can see those sprint demos, and most of these fixes were in the January release 1.683 that moved to Sovrin Network in February. Similarly, we've done a bunch of bug fixes for view change. These also have improved stability and performance, but they didn't fix the fundamental problem. So that's why we're going to spend July and August working on that fundamental change to the view change algorithm. And final item we want people to be aware of is that with the 1.7 release, we changed how the GitHub scripts are working, about how the Jenkins scripts are working, to clean up the release process quite a bit. Is the way it works with GitHub, to be able to make clear distinction between temporary builds and long-term builds, and what is the relationship between the Indy packages and other dependencies like Ursa, things like that. So you can get more details on that in Indy 1992 and the sprint demo from 2 months ago, month and a half ago. We expect to do another round of that in June. Currently, GitHub releases, all the dev releases are for Indy Node are being marked as official releases. We want to clean that up. And there are a few other places where we want to improve the release process. This is alongside the migration to GitLab that the Sovrin Foundation has been leading. So we do expect that work to happen as well, and the two efforts should work well together. Any questions about any of this laundry list of goodness that we've released in the last 6 months?
No, Richard, it's a great summary. It's really good to know that all of this, it tends to be sort of below the waterline to a lot of us, and so it's really good to know that it's gone on. Also, I want to point out to folks that are looking at Indy deployments, the transaction author agreement actually solves some really deep and profound policy issues in terms of GDPR. I don't want to say compliance, but GDPR compatibility, and other things that would be involved in any production deployment of Indy for real DID authors. So just wanted to put in that plug.
Thank you, Drummond. Thank you for that. Now, going forward, the ledger's largely stable now. Once we do PBF TV change, we feel like it's rock solid for the use cases. The ledger uptime for Sovrin Network has been been really good the last 6 months. We've had minor outages, but not major outages since last December. So I expect the rate of change, the pace of development on Indy Node to reduce. We're going to be more focused. The Evernote team is we want to do a round of bug fixing before the end of the summer, and then we recognize there's some features we need to do in the short term, which is we're really focused on DID docs. We really want to get the new approach to presentation, credential presentations, and schema defs that was presented last week. We want to get that integrated in the ledger. We recognize there's some other efforts around OnCreds 2.0, but I'm not sure who else is planning to contribute to the ledger in the next 6 months. So one concern that the team has, that the Evernote team has, is that we recognize ledger performance meets our needs today, but probably does not meet our needs long term. And we're going to need help thinking about what that future ledger should look like and doing the work necessary to get it there, especially with OnCreds 2.0. That's going to give users some nice capabilities around revocation and around registering agents or removing agents, but that's going to cause a lot more writes to the ledger. and that makes us nervous because we have a certain set of performance, and we recognize usage is going to grow a lot over the next year. So we hope people will join us
more
in
people
working on the
using
core
it.
ledger.
Is that what you mean?
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Just for more people using the ledger in general, not necessarily any technical issue from the result of it, correct?
Yeah, that is people start using revocation in production. Okay. They'll probably be updating it won't be a tails file, but it'll be other things, similar accumulators. As people register agents, there's an accumulator they touch for that. We've talked about features like dead drops and DKMS that require people to write to the ledger. All this usage should change our profile, our relationship between reads and writes quite a bit, besides the fact that people are coming to production now, and that usage is going to increase a lot. So there's definitely some concerns about the ledger meeting our needs over the long term, and we're going to have to figure out as a community how we make it evolve to meet those needs. Evernym's development, we can't do it all, and in fact, now that the ledger meets our main needs, we need to focus on other things like Aries and the SDK. So the pace of development is going to drop unless other people start contributing more.
Well, and I think one of the things to point out here is we're still very much read heavy and write light, except for the case of payment transfers or double spend proof registry use cases. And as we get to transferable credentials and a few other things that we'll be discussing over the coming months, I think more of that will become clear. And really what we're trying to get to is we want to have developer diversity across all the different use cases and organizations, both for the SDK and the Aries work, but especially also for the ledger work. That way, as investments go up or down across different parts of the ecosystem, we maintain kind of constant support, and we know that we have kind of real-time response for any issues that arise.
Exactly. Similarly, when Sovrin being the largest public deployment of Indy, when there's problems on the Sovrin network currently, Lynn and Adam take the brunt of diagnosing those problems and looking for a solution. They're backed by the Evernym team, specifically Mike and Alex and Sergey and crew. But we need a broader community of people that understand Node and can help maintain it, so that this resource can work for everybody. Specifically, time zone rotations, weekend rotations, things like that. We need to rely on this network, and we're going to need help to do that. Now, I took longer than expected. Apologize for being long-winded. But Lynn, you're going to update us on some more on the Sovrin network, correct?
That's right. I have a few updates on information, I guess, on how the stuff that Richard talked about is going to be rolled out to the Sovrin network, and when it'll be there, and all that kind of stuff. So just before I do that, though, I'd like to take 1 second and voice appreciation for everyone in the community who's donated code and helped out to make the Sovrin network as successful as it is, and especially appreciate the Evernym team recently has been really responsive to any issues that we found, and is helping us to make it work. So kudos to everyone who's helped out with that. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. So before I get that didn't seem to work.
Yeah, Zoom's giving everybody. Oh, it came. It worked.
There we go. We're seeing the important reminders. They must be important.
Yeah. So anything I say shouldn't be. Essentially, this is our standard disclaimer here. Anything I say shouldn't be construed as a promise from the Sovrin Foundation to do anything. These dates are all kind of estimates, and they're based on how well things work on the various networks as we progress through updating them. Just a quick reminder for anyone who doesn't know, our regular schedule is to update the BuilderNet on the first Monday of each month, and then the staging net on the second Monday, and the main net on the third Monday. So we're in a kind of a progressive update schedule in case something goes wrong. And something did go wrong on the BuilderNet last Monday, and so we'll be pushing our schedule out, and to the staging net being upgraded on the third Monday or fourth Monday this month. I can't remember which one it is. The fourth Monday is where the staging net is pushing out to, because we're getting some patches for the BuilderNet. And then the main net will be updated on the 1st of July as part of the June update. I think that's what Richard was kind of referring to earlier when he was talking about me, talking about when we were going to get the transaction author stuff running, and that's in a little while. So anyway, there's the standard disclaimer, and we'll just skip down a few slides here to talk a little bit about what has been happening on the BuilderNet. So in May, we got some token things out to where we're able to mint some test tokens and start testing.
Hey, Lynn, did you change slides? Because I don't think Zoom followed.
Oh, it didn't follow. Yeah, I'm on a BuilderNet slide now. You can't see that one?
Yeah, we cannot yet. So maybe you should stop sharing and share again.
Yep.
Had lots of problems today for me. Thanks. We can see now. BuilderNet.
Okay. So and we were able to do a minting and then a transfer of some tokens. We didn't have the fees functionality in yet, and I think that's not in until this release, and so we won't be able to check that until the BuilderNet hot fixes are in place and going. So we're not able to do the fee table stuff yet. So we're behind on this date here. We didn't make it up to updating the fee tables or validating fee transactions yet. And also we're not able to do this unfortunately doesn't include the transaction author agreement stuff. We have not got that on here as a date available because it's the BuilderNet's not quite there. So we're in the process though, and that's up and coming shortly.
So,
week.
So if I wanted to test tokens, Lynn, this means that I could send you an email and you can transfer tokens to my address, and I can start doing integration work using permissionless rights on this network once the config is updated?
Yep, that's right. We've got a slide for that right at the end here. We'll cover that in just a few seconds. We kind of did the slides change to staging net, or do I have to reshare again?
It changed.
Right.
It's working.
So on the staging net, we're hoping to do the same thing with tokens and start testing token transfers and get the fee tables all ready. That June 12th on there is not right because we have to switch the release is going to be on the 24th, I believe, or the update for that network will be the 24th, and so it'll be a couple days before we get the fees out to that guy. So changing as we go here, we're letting you know that these things are up and coming, and essentially we're letting people know because it'd be great if other people were able to start doing some of the same stuff that I'm doing, and the instructions for how to get tokens or test tokens and start testing on the BuilderNet are right here. Just build a payment address and send it to support@sovrin.org, and I can pass over some test tokens to you, and you can start having at it on the BuilderNet. And then there's a whole bunch of instructions and details on how to do that kind of thing, to do the transfers and stuff in another spreadsheet that I have. I should probably copy that link and share it in the chat here really quick. I'll grab that in just a second. And this is just kind of, we're in the process of making a tool so that people can get their own test tokens transferred. This is kind of a little bit on the back burner right now as we're trying to make sure the auth rules and the transaction author agreements and the other token stuff are all functional on the network. Those have kind of taken priority over this because it's pretty easy to do what's here in the previous thing. Just send a request to support at sovereign.org in the meantime. But in the future, we'll have it a little bit easier for people to get their own test tokens on the BuilderNet or the StagingNet.
And so people understand, there's two paths for writing to the network. We have the permission path with the endorser, and that doesn't require any tokens, but it does require somebody to be approved as an endorser, so that they are following the transaction author agreement and they're compensating, paying for their share of the network rights, paying the fees, and they'll do that off ledger. But then there's the permissionless path. You can get a token, and then you can write without any approval from anybody, because spam will be expensive, and each write you cover the cost of running the network. So that's why there's the two paths, and we need people to test both, because tokens should not break the endorser side, and both should continue to work. So please do test both paths.
So I didn't have anything else as far as stuff. I guess that's a good thing since we're at the top of the hour here.
Yeah. Any questions for Lynn? Thank you, Lynn, for the updates and for all the work you do to keep that network running for us all to build our solutions. Any other questions? Anything else we want to cover today? Open discussion for 3 minutes. Man, without Sean, everybody's quiet. I'm just not as entertaining.
You just haven't given everybody the full 2 minutes to come off mute.
Exactly. What do we call it? A 90-second pause is one Nathan. I should wait one Nathan for people to come off of mute. I can't handle two Nathans. It's too long a pause. So Nathan, I was thinking about where I should put my slides since we're moving away from Google Drive. What's the best way to put my slides so people can use them?
That's a good question. Certainly uploading the Google Slides to the Indy Drive will allow people to reference them more easily in the short term. And then I believe we have a mechanism for attaching them to Confluence where it will import a chunk of the content into Confluence itself. We should ask Solona what she expects as best practice there, whether exporting it as a PDF is what we prefer, or whether there's another mechanism that we should kind of standardize on.
I'll export as a PDF and attach to Confluence. Let's see how that goes. And yeah, I'll discuss with Solona, but that's a good plan. So I'll do that. I'll add it to the agenda, and that way people can access it. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Any other questions, topics we should cover today?
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so we'll meet next week while Nathan and I are on vacation, but then you can figure out with Sean what the future schedule should be. So until next week.
Thanks, everybody.